The founding of the College of Winterhold, a Skyrim story. Prologue. The wind howled through the jagged peaks of Skyrim's northern mountains, carrying with it the scent of snow and the salt of the Sea of Ghosts. The land was a rugged expanse of endless ice, frozen tundra, and towering cliffs. A place of harsh beauty, where the skies were eternally overcast and the wind was unrelenting, shaping both the land and the people who lived upon it. Here the sun seldom broke through the thick cloud cover, and the days were long, cold, and often unforgiving. The Nords, hardy and proud, had made their home in this unforgiving wilderness, their strongholds carved from stone and ice. Winterhold, however, stood as an anomaly in this stark landscape. Once a great city, its grandeur had slowly faded over the centuries, and now it seemed little more than a shell of its former glory. The collapse of its bridge had left the city isolated from the rest of Skyrim, and its people lived in the shadow of their once proud heritage. Struggling to survive amidst the harshness of the elements and the erosion of time, in the midst of this bleakness, a figure appeared. Clad in a heavy cloak and walking with a staff of intricate design, his face was hidden beneath the hood, but the aura surrounding him was undeniable. He was a man of purpose, of vision, and of power. Shalidor, the archmage, had arrived. Winterhold's streets were quiet as he approached. The few villagers who dared venture out on such a cold day, eyeing him with both curiosity and wariness. They had heard the whispers of the man who claimed to be a mage, one who sought to build something monumental, something that would change the very fabric of their world. The streets, however, were not filled with excitement, but with suspicion. The people of Winterhold had seen too many men come with promises of greatness, only to leave in failure or ruin. But Shalidor was different. He had not come to conquer, nor to pillage, nor to charm with empty words. He had come to build. Shalidor's first interaction with the villagers was brief, but telling. He arrived at the heart of the town, where the cold winds blew across the open market square. His presence undeniable amidst the quiet gloom of the place. The few villagers who were gathered in the square paused as he approached, their eyes narrowing, measuring him. He walked with purpose, his head held high, his gaze steady. It was not arrogance that radiated from him, but the quiet confidence of one who had seen more than most could imagine. "Is it true?" an old man asked, his voice a rasp of age and weariness. "Is what true?" Shalidor asked, pausing in his step to face the man. "You've come to rebuild the college, to bring back magic to this place?" The man's voice trembled with a mixture of doubt and something else, fear perhaps. The wind blew through the tattered remains of Winterhold's once proud buildings, and for a moment the air seemed heavy with unspoken history. "I have," Shalidor replied, his voice calm and steady. "I've come to build a place of learning, of power, and of protection, a place where magic can be understood and harnessed for the betterment of all." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances, some muttering under their breath, while others looked skeptical. "You come at a time of hardship," an elder woman added, her voice wary. "The storms never stop. The bridge fell, the city crumbled, and now we're left to fight for survival. Magic is not the answer." Shalidor's gaze softened. He understood their fear, but it only reinforced his resolve. "Magic is not to blame for your hardships," he said gently. "It is not the magic that is dangerous, but how it is wielded. I've come to build something that will protect this city, protect Skyrim, and ensure that the dangers of magic are kept in check." Before the villagers could respond, a tall figure stepped from the shadows of the nearby structures. Tharvild Stonehand, the elder of Winterhold, approached with a cautious yet curious expression. His face was lined with the weathered markings of age, and his eyes, though stern, held the wisdom of a man who had seen decades of hardship and struggle. "You've come to build, then," Tharvild said, his voice a gravelly baritone. "But we've seen many come and go. What makes you different from the others?" Shalidor met his gaze, his eyes gleaming with an inner light that spoke of knowledge and vision. "I do not come to take what is yours, Tharvild. I come to offer something greater. I offer you a chance to see beyond the horizon, to create something that will stand for generations to come. A beacon of knowledge, a place of strength, the College of Winterhold." The wind howled once more, but Tharvild stood still, his expression unreadable. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "I will listen," he said, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. But words are not enough. You will need more than just promises if you want to gain the trust of this city. And so it began. Shalidor's vision, his dream, had found its first ally in Winterhold's elder. But the road ahead would not be easy, and the people would not be so quick to embrace what they did not understand. For magic was a dangerous thing in Skyrim, and those who wielded it were often met with suspicion, or worse. But Shalidor was not deterred. He knew that in order to build the college, he would need more than just the Elder's approval. He would need the strength of his fellow mages, the support of the people, and the will to persevere against the forces that would seek to tear down his vision. As the first snowflakes began to fall in Winterhold, Shalidor's resolve was as firm as the ancient stones beneath his feet. This would be no simple task, but it was one he was willing to face. He had come to bring magic back to Skyrim, and no storm, no force of nature would stop him from realizing that dream. Chapter 1. The Call to Magic. The days that followed Shalidor's arrival in Winterhold were filled with whispers. The wind carried rumors through the streets, like the howling storms that often raged across the land. The people of Winterhold were a cautious lot, hardened by years of isolation and the seemingly endless cold that gripped their city. They had seen no end of people come with promises of restoration, visions of a future brighter than the one they had known, only to leave them with little more than ashes. Yet Shalidor was different. His presence alone spoke of a deeper power, a force that could not be ignored. His calm demeanor, his unwavering confidence in his cause, and his willingness to listen to the people, all set him apart. However, while the villagers were wary, a small group of influential figures saw potential in what he proposed, and it was with these figures that Shalidor sought to make his first true alliances. The first was Harvold Ironbeard, the master builder of Winterhold, a man as stubborn as he was skilled. Harvold had seen the effects of the college's collapse in previous years, watching as the once great structure fell into ruin and disrepair. He had no interest in magic. To him, magic was the tool of the ambitious and the reckless, something that could only bring harm. The stone and timber were his elements of creation, not the ethereal forces of the arcane. Shalidor, however, was resolute. After days of speaking with villagers, listening to their concerns and demonstrating the benefits of controlled magic, Shalidor approached Harvold in the quiet of his workshop. The room was filled with the smell of wood and the sound of hammers striking metal, a stark contrast to the swirling snowstorm outside. "Harvold," Shalidor began, his voice steady, "I know you have little use for magic, but I am asking for your help in rebuilding Winterhold, not just the college, but the city itself. I need a builder, someone who understands the strength of stone and the resilience of wood. Will you work with me?" Harvold's gruff face twisted with skepticism as he set down the chisel he had been working with. His hands, weathered and worn, wiped away the sweat that had collected on his brow. "You think I'll help you rebuild the college?" Harvold's tone was sharp, but there was a glimmer of curiosity behind his words. "I've seen what magic does, Shalidor. It tears things apart. It's the reason Winterhold is in ruins. No one needs more of it here." Shalidor stood firm, his eyes locked on Harvold's. "Magic does not destroy. It is the misuse of magic that causes harm. The college will be a place where magic can be controlled, studied, and used for the benefit of all. It can protect this city, keep it safe from the storms, the dangers, even the enemies that seek to undermine us. But it needs your craftsmanship to stand strong." Harvold was silent for a long moment, considering the words carefully. He knew that the city's defenses were weak, the structures brittle and vulnerable. If Shalidor was truly offering a way to protect Winterhold, to fortify it against the elements and the dangers of Skyrim, perhaps there was merit in what he was saying. But it would take more than promises to convince him. "I don't trust mages," Harvold muttered, his voice rough. "But I trust stone. Stone doesn't lie, and it doesn't fall apart unless it's built wrong." Shalidor's face softened with a small smile. "Then together we will build something that lasts, something that will stand for generations." After a long pause, Harvold finally gave a reluctant nod. "I'll help you, Shalidor, but mark my words, if your magic causes even a single stone to fall, I'll have no part in it." A tentative partnership had been formed. Harvold agreed to lead the building efforts of the college, using his expertise to ensure that the structure would be strong enough to withstand both the elements and the magical. forces that would be at play. And so, the first steps of the college's rebirth began, though the road ahead was still filled with uncertainty. Meanwhile, Shalidor continued his efforts to prove the value of magic to the villagers. He knew that while Harvald was an important ally, he would need more than just a master builder to bring his vision to life. The people of Winterhold were deeply skeptical of magic, and rightfully so. The events of the past had shown them time and again that power, unchecked, could bring nothing but destruction. But Shalidor was not one to back down from a challenge. To win the trust of the people, he decided to demonstrate the practical benefits of magic, not just for defense, but for daily life. One crisp morning, as the sun struggled to rise through the thick clouds, Shalidor gathered a small group of villagers at the edge of the city, near the frozen shores of the Sea of Ghosts. He stood before them, his robes fluttering in the wind, the weight of his staff pressing into the snow beneath his feet. "Today," Shalidor began, "I will show you the power of magic, not the kind that tears cities apart, but the kind that can heal, protect, and create." With a simple flick of his hand, the snow at his feet began to shift. The air crackled with energy, and before the eyes of the villagers, a large stone platform began to rise from the ground. It was not a feat of destruction, but one of creation. A platform large enough to hold several people, lifted effortlessly by the magic flowing through Shalidor's fingers. "This," he said, gesturing to the floating stone, "is but a small example of the power that magic can bring. Imagine this, using magic to lift fallen trees, to move heavy stones, to create structures without the need for laborious effort. Magic can change the way we live and work." The villagers watched in awe, their eyes wide with wonder. For the first time, they saw magic not as a dangerous force, but as a tool, one that could aid them in their daily struggles. But skepticism still lingered. The fear of the unknown, of things that could not be controlled, was not so easily erased. Harvald stepped forward, eyeing the floating platform warily. "Impressive," he muttered, his voice gruff. "But it doesn't change the fact that magic is dangerous. That stone won't hold up in a storm, and neither will your magic." Shalidor nodded, his face unreadable. "I know the risks, Harvald, and that is why the college will be a place of learning, a place where we can study magic's dangers as much as its wonders. But first, we need the trust of the people. And to earn that trust, we must show them that we can work together, builders, mages, and villagers alike, to create something that lasts." Harvald crossed his arms, his gaze lingering on the floating stone before returning to Shalidor. "Fine, I'll help, but don't say I didn't warn you if things start to fall apart." And so, despite the lingering doubts of the villagers and the mistrust in the air, the first stages of the college's construction began. The stone foundations were laid, the wards were carefully planned, and the framework of the grand structure began to take shape under Harvald's meticulous eye. But even as the building progressed, the challenges of uniting the people of Winterhold and proving the value of magic loomed large. Shalidor knew this was only the beginning. Magic, for all its wonder and promise, was still a force of uncertainty and fear. He would need more than just stone and mortar to build the college. He would need the hearts and minds of those around him. Chapter 2: The Foundations. As the snow continued to blanket Winterhold, the construction of the college took shape slowly but surely. The streets, once lifeless and desolate, now hummed with the sounds of work, men and women hauling stone, raising beams, and organizing the materials needed to rebuild the once great college. Harvald Ironbeard oversaw the efforts, his experienced hands guiding every decision made in the building's construction. His towering figure was a steady presence among the workers, his voice booming over the wind as he barked commands. Though Harvald remained skeptical of Shalidor's magic, he had begun to see the potential. Magic, when used correctly, could save time and labor. Where stone was too heavy to move, Shalidor's subtle telekinesis shifted it into place. Where the ground beneath their feet was too frozen to dig, Shalidor summoned heat and fire to melt the ice, allowing the workers to break through the permafrost. But even as the college's foundations were set into the earth, darker forces stirred beneath the surface. Magic, as Harvald had warned, was not a neutral force. It was a tool, a power that could be shaped and used for both good and ill. And while Shalidor was determined to harness it for noble purposes, not everyone saw it as such. Among the skeptical, there were those who saw magic as a threat. The winds of rebellion began to stir quietly, carried by those who feared the unknown power that Shalador was attempting to harness. Ulfrid Frostbane, a former leader of Winterhold's more conservative faction, was one such figure. He had been outspoken against the college from the very beginning, calling it an abomination, a place that would attract dangerous forces, both from within Skyrim and beyond. Frostbane had gathered a small group of followers, people who feared the potential consequences of Shalador's vision. They were not outright enemies of Winterhold, but they were fiercely protective of their way of life, and the introduction of the college was seen as a foreign invasion. Frostbane's faction had been spreading rumors, sowing distrust and fear among the villagers, whispering about the dangers of magic and how it had already caused the fall of Winterhold's former glory. Shalador knew that the construction of the college would not be without its challenges, but he was undeterred. The land itself seemed to respond to his presence. As the building grew, so too did the presence of magic in the area. It was subtle at first, an occasional spark of arcane energy that flickered in the air, or a whisper of an invisible force tugging at the edges of the stone. But with each passing day, the magic of the college began to stir more strongly, seeping into the very bones of the land. It was during one of these early days that the first major sign of magical interference came. As Shalador walked the grounds, overseeing the work being done, a sudden gust of wind swept through the site. It was a cold wind, sharper than the usual blizzards that had become characteristic of Winterhold. This wind was different. It carried with it the taste of something wrong. Shalador's eyes narrowed as he felt a shift in the air, a disturbance in the magical wards he had placed around the site. The winds seemed to bend and swirl unnaturally, and the snowflakes that had been falling in steady, predictable patterns now twisted and spun in the air as though they were caught in some invisible vortex. He reached out with his magic, seeking to control the wind, to understand its source. And there, in the center of the disturbance, he felt it. A pulse of dark magic, faint but unmistakable, emanating from the heart of Winterhold. "Harvold," Shalador called, his voice firm. "Halt construction for now. Something is wrong." Harvold looked up from where he stood, overseeing the placement of a massive stone pillar. His brow furrowed as he saw the way Shalador was standing, his staff raised, eyes focused on something unseen. "What is it now?" Harvold growled, clearly frustrated by the interruption. "The stones won't build themselves, you know." Shalador's face was grim as he turned to the master builder. "There is something unnatural in the air. Something is attempting to interfere with the college's construction. It is not a natural storm, Harvold. It is magic. Someone is using it against us." The workers, sensing the tension, began to murmur, their unease growing. Some of them began to back away from the site, unwilling to stay any longer in the presence of this disturbance. Harvold glanced around, seeing that many of the workers had already halted their tasks and were retreating to the warmth of the nearby buildings. Shalador stepped forward, his eyes searching the horizon. The wind howled once again, the unnatural chill sinking deeper into his bones as he scanned the area. He could feel the pulse of dark magic growing stronger, and it was coming closer. "Stay close," Shalador ordered Harvold. "This will not end well if we let it continue." Harvold hesitated, but then, reluctantly, he nodded and fell into step behind the mage. They walked toward the edge of the construction site, where the wind was at its strongest. Shalador's staff crackled with energy, its glow casting an eerie light across the snow-dusted landscape. Suddenly, there was a flash of dark energy, a crackling bolt that shot through the air, striking the ground mere inches from Shalador's feet. He staggered back, the force of the impact sending a jolt of energy through his body. Harvold cursed under his breath and immediately dropped to a defensive stance, his hands hovering near his axe. "By the gods," Harvold muttered, his eyes wide with disbelief. What in oblivion was that? Shalador's expression was grim. "Dark magic. Someone is trying to sabotage the college. Whoever it is, they're using power far more dangerous than I had anticipated." Just as Shalador finished speaking, a shadowy figure emerged from the swirling snow. It was cloaked in darkness, its form shrouded in an impenetrable mist. The figure moved with unnatural speed, appearing and disappearing like a wraith on the wind. Shalador's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing. This was no simple disturbance. This was a threat, a deliberate act of sabotage. "I will deal with this," Shalidor said, his voice resolute. He raised his staff high, channeling his magic to create a barrier of protective light around himself and Harvold. Harvold, ever the skeptic, didn't fully understand what was happening, but he stood by Shalidor's side, ready to act. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, his voice gruff but determined. "Stay close. I will confront this intruder," Shalidor replied, his eyes fixed on the shadowy figure that was now advancing toward them. "And whatever happens, Harvold, don't let your guard down." The figure moved forward, its movements eerily fluid. There was no sound of footsteps, no shift of the wind, only the sensation of something shifting in the very air around them. The darkness around the figure seemed to consume everything it touched. "Who are you?" Shalidor demanded, his voice steady despite the rising tension. The figure did not respond immediately. It was silent, moving closer until the air itself seemed to vibrate with energy. And then, with a flick of its hand, the figure cast a spell so potent that it could almost be felt in the ground beneath their feet. The wind roared again, as if it were alive, and the sky darkened further. Magic crackled, jagged and violent, as though the very fabric of reality itself was being torn. Shalidor steeled himself, raising his staff to deflect the incoming attack, but he knew this fight would not be an easy one. The intruder was powerful, and whoever was behind this attack had no intention of letting the college rise without interference. Chapter: Altmer and Dunmer. The tension between Shalidor and the shadowy figure was palpable. As the figure raised its hand once more, preparing to unleash another torrent of dark magic, Shalidor's mind raced, calculating his next move. The barrier of light he had conjured pulsed with energy, flickering under the intensity of the attack. He could feel the pressure, the strain of containing such a violent force. And yet, he was not alone. Harvold, though a stranger to the subtleties of magic, stood beside him, his axe ready in his hands. Though his focus was primarily on the figure that threatened them, Harvold's mind worked with the precision of a master craftsman. He had seen destruction, but he had also seen perseverance. Stone could be cracked, but it could also be mended. "Hold strong," Shalidor shouted over the howl of the wind. "The barrier won't hold forever. We need to end this." Before either could make a move, the shadowy figure dissipated into the swirling storm, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Silence reigned for a few brief, unsettling moments. The wind still howled, but the immediate threat had passed. Shalidor lowered his staff cautiously, still sensing the magical disturbances that lingered in the air. His eyes narrowed in suspicion. Whoever this was, they were no ordinary foe. This was a calculated, deliberate attack, not a random act of defiance. The magic had felt cold, twisted, more akin to the dark forces that were rumored to lurk beneath Skyrim's ancient ruins and forgotten crypts. Harvold stepped forward, his voice low and gruff. "This isn't over. Whoever they are, they'll come again. I've seen too much destruction in my time to think otherwise." "I know," Shalidor replied, his voice firm with resolve. "But we cannot let fear rule us now. The college must rise." For the next few days, the workers were on edge, the memory of the shadowy attack lingering in their minds. No one was sure when the next strike would come or what form it would take. Still, under Harvold's watchful eye, the construction continued. The great stone foundations were laid, and the architecture of the college began to rise from the frozen earth. Every piece of stone was carefully placed, reinforced with magic to ensure the structure would withstand both the elements and any further attacks. Yet even as the college began to take shape, Shalidor knew that the danger was far from over. Magic could be a source of great power, but it also attracted the attention of those who would seek to misuse it. To solidify his vision, he knew he would need the support of powerful allies, scholars who could understand the deeper truths of magic, and leaders who could stand with him against the forces that would seek to tear the college apart. With this in mind, Shalidor made plans to journey beyond Winterhold, to seek out the greatest minds from across Tamriel. His first destination was the Somerset Isle, home of the Altmer, the High Elves, and a people who had long been scholars of the arcane arts. If there were any who would understand the true purpose of the college and its potential for good, it would be the Altmer. The journey to Somerset was a long one. Shalidor, undeterred by the harsh winters of Skyrim and the tumultuous sea between Winterhold and the island, sailed across the waters. His thoughts focused on what lay ahead. Alongside him was Harvold, his face a mask of stoic resolve. Though Harvold had little interest in the politics of elves or the finer details of magical theory, he trusted Shalidor's vision and was loyal to the cause. The journey would take time, but Harvold would not be swayed. As they arrived in Somerset, the air was thick with the scent of salt water and fragrant blooms that grew along the island's shores. The architecture was a stunning display of intricate carvings, shimmering marble, and towering spires that reached toward the sky like a testament to the Altmer's long-held mastery of both magic and craftsmanship. The city of Alinor, the capital of Somerset, was bustling with activity as scholars, mages, and merchants filled the streets, each one contributing to the island's rich tapestry of knowledge and culture. It was here that Shalidor sought out Falandil Irenian, a prominent Altmer scholar whose name was well known across Tamriel for his deep understanding of the arcane. Falandil had spent decades studying the complexities of magic, and Shalidor hoped that his expertise would provide valuable insights into the creation of the college. The meeting took place within the Grand Library of Alinor, a sprawling hall of knowledge that stretched high into the air, its walls lined with shelves of ancient tomes and scrolls. Falandil was a tall, lean Altmer with a regal bearing, his golden skin gleaming under the soft light of the library. His eyes were sharp, piercing, and full of the kind of wisdom that came only with age and experience. Shalidor of Winterhold, Falandil greeted him with a deep bow, his voice rich with the accent of Somerset. I have heard much of your work. The restoration of the college is a noble endeavor, though I admit it has sparked quite a bit of discussion here in Alinor. I appreciate your time, Falandil, Shalidor said, offering a respectful nod. I've come to seek your counsel. The College of Winterhold will be a place where magic is studied, understood, and wielded responsibly. I hope to build a haven where mages can learn, but also learn how to control their power. Your expertise in this field would be invaluable. Falandil stroked his chin thoughtfully, his gaze drifting toward the grand shelves of knowledge surrounding them. Indeed, magic is a double-edged sword. The pursuit of knowledge should always be tempered with caution. But you must understand, Shalidor, that not all who seek to study magic will share your vision. There will always be those who, blinded by ambition, will misuse this power. I am aware of the risks, Shalidor replied, his tone unwavering. But I am determined to ensure that the college serves as a place of protection, not a place of danger. Falandil's expression softened, and he nodded. Very well, I shall accompany you to Winterhold. My knowledge of magical theory and the deeper mysteries of the arcane will be a strong asset to your cause. Shalidor felt a weight lifted from his shoulders. With Falandil's support, the foundation of the college would be stronger, both in the construction of knowledge and in the wisdom to guide its students. But even as he was grateful for Falandil's willingness to help, he knew that his journey was far from over. Next, Shalidor would need to seek out the knowledge of the Dunmer, the dark elves of Morrowind, who were as renowned for their mastery of destructive magic as they were for their cunning and resilience. It would not be an easy journey. Morrowind was a land ravaged by war and strife, its people hardened by the hardships they had endured. But if he could convince the Dunmer to lend their expertise, the college would have the strength it needed to stand firm against the forces that sought to tear it down. Chapter 4. Psijic Influence. The journey from Somerset to Morrowind was fraught with danger and uncertainty. Shalidor had felt the weight of every step as he traversed the land, the tension in the air thickening with each passing day. The arrival of Falandil in Winterhold was a step forward, but the college would not be complete without the influence of the Dunmer, nor the insight of those who had studied magic beyond even the borders of Tamriel. Morrowind was a place steeped in tragedy and history, with its once great cities reduced to ash and ruin after the eruption of Red Mountain. The scars of the past lingered in every corner of the land, a grim reminder of the forces that had torn the Dunmer's world apart. Yet even in the face of destruction, Morrowind's people remained fiercely proud. Their mastery of magic, particularly the destructive, volatile forces of the arcane, was both revered and feared. Shalidor's mission to Morrowind was twofold: to find the scholarly minds he needed to help guide the college's teachings, and to navigate the tense political climate that threatened to divide the land even further. The Red Year had shaken the foundations of Dunmer society, and now the survivors clung to what little was left of their culture. Shalidor needed not only their expertise, but their trust. His first destination was the city of Vivec, where the remnants of the tribunal temple still held sway over the heart of the Dunmer. Here, he hoped to find the wisdom he needed, along with potential allies. Vivec, named for one of the three divine gods of the Dunmer, was a city of towering spires and intricate canals. The remnants of its ancient glory remained, though they were now worn and damaged, much like the people who inhabited it. As Shalidor and Falandil entered the city, their eyes were drawn to the stark contrast between the decadence of the city's history and the harsh reality of its present. Broken buildings and collapsed structures stood as silent witnesses to the ravages of time and war. The once proud temples were now home to scattered communities of survivors, each struggling to make sense of the new world that had been forced upon them. Shalidor had heard of a few prominent Dunmer scholars living in the city, and it was among them that he hoped to find the expertise he sought. One name in particular had reached his ears, Relais Veron, a mage of considerable skill and knowledge who had survived the eruption of Red Mountain and the upheaval that followed. His talents in the art of destruction magic, a field vital to the college's curriculum, were legendary. Finding Relais, however, was not an easy task. Vivec, though a city of ruins, was still vast, and Shalidor spent several days seeking out rumors and leads on the scholar's whereabouts. It was not until a quiet evening at a tavern on the outskirts of the city that he finally encountered him. Relais Veron was a man of imposing presence, his dark skin adorned with the traditional tattoos of his people. His eyes, however, were what drew Shalidor's attention, the pale, piercing gaze of a man who had seen the worst of the world and survived. His robes were worn, practical rather than ceremonial, and a scar that ran across his cheek told the story of battles fought long ago. When Shalidor approached him in the tavern, there was no sign of recognition in the mage's eyes. Instead, he studied the newcomer with a quiet, calculating gaze, as though weighing his very soul. "You seek something," Relais said, his voice low but clear. "What brings you to Vivec, outsider?" "I seek knowledge," Shalidor replied, his voice steady. "I seek the wisdom of the greatest scholars of magic. The College of Winterhold is rising, and I would have those who understand magic's true potential help guide it." Relais considered this for a long moment, his fingers tracing the edge of his mug thoughtfully. "Winterhold, It is a place of death and rebirth. The college, as you call it, is an ambitious venture. I wonder if you understand the true cost of such power." "I do," Shalidor said. "I have seen the destruction that unrestrained magic can cause. But the college is not just about power, it is about knowledge and control. I believe that the mages of Tamriel have a responsibility to wield magic wisely, not just for their own gain, but for the good of all." Relais studied him carefully. "And what makes you think the Dunmer would want to aid you? My people have little love for those who come seeking our aid in times of crisis. We have learned too much of the price of magic." Shalidor's eyes softened with understanding. "I do not come to take. I come to learn, to collaborate. If the Dunmer are to survive in this new world, it will be through unity and shared wisdom. Magic can be a force for destruction, yes, but it can also heal, it can rebuild. Winterhold will stand as a beacon of that possibility." There was a long pause before Relais finally spoke. "You are bold, Shalidor of Winterhold. Perhaps too bold for your own good." He looked to Falandil, who stood silently nearby, his arms crossed. "But the Altmer have their place in this scheme, and the Nords their pride. What role do the Dunmer play in this, and why should I lend my talents to such an uncertain future?" Shalidor's gaze never wavered. "Because the college will need all of Tamriel's wisdom to succeed. The magic we will teach there will not be for one race alone, it will be for all. I will not rest until the forces that destroyed Winterhold and Morrowind are put to rest for good." Relais' gaze held steady for a moment longer before he finally nodded. "I will come with you, Shalidor, not because I believe in your dream, but because I believe in the power of unity over division. If nothing else, I will see to it that your college does not become a weapon. I will help you guide it, if you can keep it from falling into the wrong hands." Shalidor exhaled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. "You have my word, Relais. The college will be a place of balance. I will make sure of it." With Relize's agreement, Shalidor now had the support of one of the most skilled destruction mages in all of Tamriel, and the knowledge of the Dunmer would add a vital layer to the teachings of the college. Yet even as he celebrated this victory, he knew that the path ahead would be far from easy. There were many forces at play, both magical and political, that would continue to challenge the dream he had set in motion. Chapter 5. A growing haven with the combined wisdom of Falandil and Relize, Shalidor's vision for the college began to take clearer shape. The foundation was solid, and the structure that had once been nothing more than stone and mortar now breathed with the potential of something far greater. Yet, even as the college began to grow, so too did the challenges that threatened its very existence. As the days passed, more scholars and mages began to trickle into Winterhold, drawn by the promise of learning and discovery. Some came from far-off lands like Hammerfell and Cyrodiil, seeking refuge from the political upheavals in their homelands. Others were more local, curious Nords or Dunmer, whose thirst for knowledge had long been stifled by the harsh realities of life in the wake of Winterhold's fall. With every new arrival, the college's influence spread further, and the village of Winterhold itself began to feel the shift in atmosphere. But not everyone was happy with the changes taking place. Ulfrid Frostbane, leader of the rebel faction that had long opposed the idea of the college, had been watching from the shadows. He had seen the changes in the village, felt the unease among his people, and recognized that Shalidor's vision was rapidly becoming a force that could not be ignored. The magic the college sought to harness was too dangerous, too unpredictable, and Ulfrid would not stand idly by while Winterhold's ancient traditions were upended. Ulfrid's resistance grew with each passing week. Rumors began to spread of sabotage, unexplained incidents where magical wards failed, construction materials were mysteriously damaged, and strange symbols appeared carved into the stone foundations of the college's growing structure. Some villagers even claimed to have seen hooded figures wandering the streets at night, their eyes burning with the glow of dark magic. Shalidor was no fool. He had known from the very beginning that there would be opposition. His goal was not to suppress those who disagreed, but to bring them into the fold, to show them the promise of what the college could offer. Still, he could not ignore the growing threat of rebellion that loomed on the horizon. It was on a cold winter's night that the full extent of Ulfrid's rebellion became clear. The college's library, a towering structure that housed countless tomes of ancient knowledge, was set ablaze. The flames crackled and roared in the distance, their glow visible even from the frozen shores of Winterhold. Shalidor was the first to arrive, his heart pounding in his chest. The inferno seemed to feed off the very energy of the college itself, its tendrils of flame curling into the night sky like a dragon's breath. He could feel the burn of the magic in the air, a mixture of destructive fire and the faint traces of enchantments long placed within the walls of the library. "What happened?" Falandil demanded as he approached, his face pale with the reflection of the fire. "How did this happen?" Shalidor clenched his fists. "Sabotage. This was no accident. Someone did this on purpose." The two mages stood for a moment in stunned silence, the weight of the situation sinking in. The library, the heart of the college's learning, was in peril. If the fire wasn't contained, all of the knowledge stored within could be lost forever. "Can you stop it?" Rilis asked, his voice grim. His normally composed demeanor was gone, replaced with the raw determination of a man who had lived through too many losses to allow this to be another one. Shalidor took a deep breath and raised his staff. He felt the arcane energy flow through him, pooling in the tip of the staff before unleashing a great surge of power toward the inferno. The magic collided with the flames, attempting to bind them to quench their hunger. For a moment, the fire seemed to falter, but it quickly rallied, the flames pushing back against the magic with a fury that Shalidor had not anticipated. "The wards," Shalidor muttered, his brow furrowing in frustration. The magical wards that protected the library had been broken, weakened by the saboteur's dark magic. Without them, the fire could not be controlled. "We need to get inside," Rilis said, his voice urgent. "There must be something we can do." Without hesitation, the three mages rushed toward the burning library, their robes billowing in the wind. As they drew closer, the heat became almost unbearable, and the smoke choked the air. But Shalidor pressed forward, knowing that every moment counted. If they couldn't stop the fire, the college would lose everything. Inside the library, the scene was chaos. The bookshelves were aflame, and the precious scrolls and tomes that had taken centuries to collect were being devoured by the flames. Mages and scholars who had been inside were already rushing to salvage what they could, but it was clear that the situation was dire. Shalidor moved swiftly through the chaos, his staff glowing with the power he wielded. With a wave of his hand, he conjured a barrier of pure light around the most critical sections of the library, shielding the remaining books from the flames. "Get them out," he shouted to the scholars, his voice booming above the crackling fire. "Save what you can." As the scholars and mages rushed to evacuate the remaining texts, Shalidor turned his focus to the source of the fire. He knew that this was no simple blaze. It had been conjured with deliberate intent, designed to consume not just the books, but the very soul of the college. He closed his eyes, reaching out with his senses, probing the magical currents that swirled through the air. There, at the heart of the fire, he felt it, the dark magic that had been used to ignite the flames. With a cry, Shalidor thrust his staff forward, sending a wave of pure arcane energy directly into the heart of the fire. For a moment, the flames surged as if protesting, but then they began to dissipate. The dark magic was banished, and the fire slowly began to die. Shalidor collapsed to his knees, drained from the effort. The library, though saved from complete destruction, had been heavily damaged. Shelves were burned, scrolls charred beyond recognition, and the once grand halls were now a shadow of their former glory. But the worst blow had been averted. The knowledge of the college had been preserved, and with it, the future of Winterhold itself. After the fire was finally quelled, Shalidor and the others stood among the smouldering ruins, the air heavy with the scent of smoke and loss. The damage was great, but the college had survived. For now. Ulfrid Frostbane's rebellion had taken a dark turn. No longer was it merely a faction of dissenters. It had become a force intent on destroying everything Shalidor had worked for. But Shalidor knew that this would not be the end. He would fight for the college, for the future of Winterhold, and for the magic that could heal rather than harm. The path forward would be difficult, but with the support of his allies, Shalidor was determined to see the college rise, even if it meant standing against the very forces that sought to bring it down. Chapter: The Rebel Threat. The destruction of the library had left a scar on Winterhold that would not easily fade. Yet, for all the damage, there was a quiet resolve in the hearts of Shalidor and his growing circle of allies. The flames that had threatened to consume the college had not destroyed its spirit. If anything, it had only solidified their commitment to the cause. But as Shalidor gazed out over the ruins of the library in the days following the fire, he felt the presence of something darker lurking just beyond the horizon. The rebel faction, led by Ulfrid Frostbane, had proven that it was more than just a fringe group of discontented villagers. They were organized, determined, and their influence had begun to spread throughout Winterhold and beyond. Shalidor had known that the college's success would not be without resistance. The ancient Nords, steeped in their traditions and beliefs, had long viewed magic with suspicion. To many, it was an alien force, something that had brought ruin to their once great city. The Nords had never fully embraced the college, and now, with Ulfrid's fervor pushing them to defy the establishment, Winterhold's fragile peace was on the brink of collapse. Shalidor had no illusions about the danger they faced. He had seen the potential for destruction that lay in the hands of those who misunderstood the power they sought to wield. But he also knew that the only way to safeguard the future of the college was to unite the people of Winterhold and show them the true potential of magic, a force that could heal, rebuild, and protect, not just destroy. It was a struggle that would require diplomacy, strength, and the will to fight when necessary. But even as Shalidor worked tirelessly to rebuild the college and win over the hearts of the villagers, he knew that Ulfrid's rebellion would not be easily quelled. The tension in Winterhold grew palpable as rumors of the rebels' movement spread. Ulfrid, a man of considerable charisma, had managed to rally a sizable faction of villagers and even a few disgruntled mages who believed that Shalidor's college represented an unnatural intrusion into the ways of Skyrim. They viewed the college as a threat to the old ways, the ancient rituals and rites that had governed Winterhold for centuries. One evening, as Shalidor stood in the college's newly reconstructed Hall of the Elements, a familiar face approached him. It was Relais Varen, his expression grim and tired. The strain of the ongoing resistance was beginning to show in the Dunmer's normally composed demeanor. "Shalidor," Release said quietly, his voice tinged with urgency. "It's worse than we thought. Ulfrid has managed to rally more support in the surrounding villages. They're even gaining favor in some of the other towns along the coast. If we don't act quickly, we may have a full-scale rebellion on our hands." Shalidor turned to face Release, his brow furrowing with concern. "How many are we talking about, and where are they gathering?" Release's gaze shifted to the far side of the room, as if seeing the rebellion's growing strength in his mind's eye. "They've been meeting in the old ruins just outside of Winterhold, near the abandoned stone circle. It's a place steeped in ancient Nord magic, a perfect spot for them to rally and plan in secret. They've been speaking of war." Shalidor exhaled sharply, pacing across the room as he processed the news. "I had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but if they're speaking of war..." He trailed off, lost in thought. The reality of the situation weighed heavily on him. The college was not just a school, it was a symbol, and symbols were powerful things. If Ulfrid could stoke the fires of rebellion, the entire region could descend into chaos. Release watched him for a long moment before speaking again. "What are we going to do, Shalidor? We cannot afford to ignore this. We need to act before they grow too strong." Shalidor stopped, turning to face his fellow mage. "I've sent word to the Council of Mages in Cyrodiil. We may have support coming, but it will take time. In the meantime, we must prepare Winterhold for what's to come. I won't let Ulfrid tear down what we've built here." Release nodded solemnly, his hand resting on the hilt of his staff. "Then let us make sure the college stands strong, whatever comes next." The two mages exchanged a final glance, both aware of the grave situation at hand. They knew that the days ahead would be fraught with danger, but there was no turning back now. The college had to endure. That night, Shalidor stood on the high balcony of the college, looking out over the darkened landscape. The wind howled through the cold, the sky a canvas of swirling clouds. The glow of the college's lights barely pierced the thick night air, casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground. The city of Winterhold, nestled against the cliffs, seemed eerily quiet, too quiet. The rebellion was coming, and when it came, Shalidor would stand ready. The following days were spent preparing for the worst. Shalidor and his allies worked tirelessly to reinforce the college's defenses, setting up wards and barriers that would protect against the magic that Ulfrid's followers might wield. The college was a place of knowledge, not warfare, but they had no choice. The rebels had made it clear that they would stop at nothing to see the college destroyed, and Shalidor would not let that happen. Word spread quickly among the villagers that the college was preparing for conflict. Some, including many of the younger Nords who had begun to see the value in Shalidor's vision, rallied to his side. They were joined by a handful of mages who had once been skeptical, but had come to understand the necessity of the college. But not all were so willing. Ulfrid's influence was strong, and there were many who still viewed the college with distrust. As the days grew colder and the winds began to howl stronger over the cliffs, the final confrontation seemed inevitable. The rebels were gathering, their numbers swelling with each passing day. They had made their intentions clear. They would march on the college and destroy it, as they had threatened to do from the very beginning. Shalidor stood once again at the edge of the college's highest tower, watching the horizon. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale light over the land. The storm clouds loomed, and in their darkness, Shalidor felt the weight of the choice that lay before him. He could not let Winterhold fall to the flames again. Not now, not after everything they had fought for. But the question remained, how far would he be willing to go to protect his dream? Chapter 7. The Library Inferno. The storm was inevitable, but it was also a symbol. The wind howled in fury, whipping around the College of Winterhold like the sound of 1,000 angry voices. Shalidor stood at the pinnacle of the tallest tower, looking out over the snow-covered landscape. The distant glow of firelight flickered on the horizon as the rebels gathered, their numbers swelling like an unstoppable tide. He could feel the pulse of magic in the air, an uneasy, volatile energy that mirrored the tension building within Winterhold's walls. The night before, Shalidor had spent hours alone in his study, contemplating the course of action that lay before him. War was not a path he had chosen lightly. The college, after all, had been built on the foundation of learning and understanding, not conquest. But Ulfrid Frostbane and his followers had made it clear that no amount of diplomacy would sway them. The rebels had declared that the college would fall by fire, by force, or by the will of the gods themselves. Shalidor had given every chance for peaceful resolution, but now that path was no longer viable. The time had come for him to stand against the rebellion, to defend the dream he had worked so tirelessly to build. Winterhold and the college would endure, but at what cost? As the rebels neared, Shalidor gathered his closest allies. Falandil, Relise, and Harvold stood beside him in the great hall, their faces grim but resolute. Each had a role to play, and each knew that the coming battle would shape the future of Winterhold. "We've done all we can to prepare," Relise said quietly, his voice low, like the hum of an impending storm. His red eyes, though calm, betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. "Then we make our stand," Shalidor replied. His voice, though firm, carried the weight of a decision that no leader should ever have to make. He turned to Harvold. "How are the wards holding?" The master builder, though always practical and grounded, looked wearied from the constant vigilance. His thick beard was flecked with snow, and the lines of age and stress marred his once strong face. "They're solid, Shalidor," he said, nodding toward the stone pillars that now reinforced the college's outer defenses. "The rebel mages will have a hard time breaching them. But," he paused, his voice heavy with doubt, "they've been growing bolder. Who knows what tricks Ulfrid has at his disposal? We will face them head-on if need be," Shalidor said with finality. "But we must also think beyond the obvious. Ulfrid is a shrewd leader, and he will strike when we least expect it." Falandil stepped forward, his tall, elegant form casting a long shadow. "I've had word from the Altmer. They are ready to assist when we need them. They will come with reinforcements, but they are not yet here. We must hold the line until they arrive." Shalidor nodded, though a sense of unease gnawed at him. The Altmer's intervention would come, but in the unpredictable terrain of war, there were no guarantees. "Then we hold," he said. "We hold until reinforcements arrive, and until we end this rebellion once and for all." The day of reckoning arrived as the sun set, casting a blood-red glow across the snow-covered ground. The rebels were close now, too close for Shalidor to ignore. The college's walls, though fortified with magic and stone, stood vulnerable in the biting wind. Shalidor could feel the approaching magic in the air, heavy with the threat of dark sorcery. "Relise, prepare the mages," Shalidor ordered, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "We need every hand we can spare." Relise bowed slightly, his face set in determination. "It will be done." Falandil, ever the tactician, was already positioning the Altmer and local mages to create a defensive line. He knew that their arcane firepower would be the key to turning the tide. He did not speak often of the strategies he had studied, but in moments like this, his silence was a comfort. He had a plan, and Shalidor trusted him. "Harvold," Shalidor said, turning to the master builder, "we may need to reinforce the main gates, keep the villagers inside the walls, and make sure they're protected." Harvold nodded, but his face was dark with worry. "If Ulfrid has a force large enough to break through, there won't be much we can do, but we'll hold the line as best we can." As night fell and the storm raged above, the rebel forces arrived at the gates of Winterhold. The crunch of snow underfoot and the clash of steel on steel were faint at first, but soon they became the heartbeat of the battle. Ulfrid Frostbane stood at the front of his forces, a towering figure clad in fur and steel, his voice carrying over the wind as he called for the destruction of the college. "Shalidor," Ulfrid's voice was like thunder, reverberating in the stillness of the night. "You cannot defy nature. Your meddling with magic has brought ruin to Winterhold, and now you will pay the price. Surrender, or we will bring down your college with the power of the gods themselves." Shalidor's heart pounded in his chest. He had expected this, but hearing the words, seeing the anger in Ulfrid's eyes, sent a cold chill through his very soul. The man was consumed with vengeance. He saw no other way forward than destruction. There was no reasoning with him, no pacifying his fury. "Winterhold is not your enemy, Ulfrid," Shalidor called back, his voice firm but calm. "You are blinded by hate. We can still rebuild this land together, but only if we put aside our differences." "Enough!" Ulfrid spat, his eyes burning with fury. "You and your college are the disease that plagues this land. The gods have spoken. and your time has come." With a wave of his hand, Ulfrid unleashed a torrent of magic, fire, ice, and lightning all at once. The sheer force of his attack sent a shockwave through the college's defenses, shaking the very earth beneath them. The wind howled in protest, and the sky above crackled with magical energy. Shalidor raised his staff, calling upon the ancient wards that protected the college. The air around him shimmered with power, but even his vast magic could not hold back the storm completely. The blast sent him to his knees, but he pushed himself upright, his eyes blazing with resolve. "Falandil! Rise!" Shalidor shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "It's time to fight back. We end this now." And so the battle began. The clash of magic filled the air, a cacophony of raw energy. Lightning crackled from the tip of Ulfrid's staff, and the ground itself seemed to tremble under the weight of his fury. Shalidor stood at the heart of the battle, his staff glowing with ethereal light as he deflected the waves of magic sent his way. Beside him, Falandil and Relais stood firm, casting their own spells to ward off the rebels and protect the college. The rebels, though fierce, were no match for the combined might of the college's scholars. Magic swirled through the air in great arcs of power. As bolts of lightning collided with protective wards and waves of fire were countered with shields of pure energy. Each side fought with everything they had, but the college's foundation of knowledge and unity began to tip the balance in their favor. Yet, despite the power at their disposal, Shalidor could feel the toll of the battle. His own magic was draining him, and the strain of maintaining the protective wards was wearing on him. The college's defenders, though formidable, were stretched thin. Even with their efforts, Ulfrid's forces were relentless. Then, through the thick of the storm, Shalidor saw it, a flicker of movement in the shadows. A figure, cloaked in black, moving swiftly toward the heart of the college. It was a rebel mage, one of Ulfrid's trusted lieutenants, and they were attempting to breach the inner sanctum. "No!" Shalidor roared, his voice rising above the storm. With a surge of magic, he tore through the line of rebels, his staff crackling with raw power as he cut through their ranks. The rebel mage was close, too close, but Shalidor would not let them destroy the heart of the college. With one final, powerful incantation, he unleashed a burst of energy that shattered the mage's ward, sending them flying backward into the snow. The tide had turned. The rebels were falling back, and the college had held. Chapter: The Trial of Unity. The battle had been long, and the night was littered with the remnants of destruction. The snow had turned red with blood, the air thick with the scent of burned flesh and singed wood. Shalidor stood at the heart of the college, his body battered and bruised from the chaos, but his spirit unbroken. The rebel forces had been pushed back, and the immediate threat had passed, but the war for Winterhold's future was far from over. As dawn broke, the first light of the sun cast a pale, cold glow over the battlefield, illuminating the faces of the fallen, both rebel and defender. The college's wards had held, but at a great cost. Many had given their lives for the cause, and the price of victory was written in the blood-streaked snow. Shalidor stood atop the stone steps of the Hall of the Elements, his mind heavy with the weight of what had transpired. The destruction, the chaos, it was a far cry from the peaceful vision he had once had for Winterhold. But the path they had chosen was one of necessity. The college could not be destroyed. Not now. Not after everything they had built. The mages who had fought beside him were beginning to regroup, tending to the wounded and securing the college's perimeter. Falandil, Relais, and Harvold stood near the entrance, their faces etched with the exhaustion of battle. There was no time for celebration, no time for rest. The rebels were not yet defeated, and Winterhold's future was still uncertain. Shalidor made his way down the steps, his staff glowing faintly in his hand. He met Falandil's gaze as he approached, the Altmer's face expressionless, but his eyes betraying the same weight that Shalidor felt in his chest. "Is the inner sanctum secure?" Shalidor asked, his voice low. Falandil nodded, but his expression darkened. "For now. But I sense that Ulfrid will not relent. He will try again. This is not over." Shalidor's brow furrowed. "I know, but we've bought ourselves time. We can rebuild, we can strengthen our defenses, and we can rally support from the other holds. The Altmer and the other mages will stand with us." Rillis stepped forward, his dark eyes narrowed in thought. "The question is, how do we handle the rebels now?" We cannot let this go unpunished, but we must also show the people that we are not the enemy. The line between justice and vengeance is thin. The tension was palpable. The battle had been won, but the war for Winterhold's soul was just beginning. Shalidor knew that the aftermath of the conflict would determine the future of the college and of Skyrim itself. As the days passed, the winds of war did not cease. Ulfrid's rebellion was far from crushed, and though the immediate threat had been quelled, the unrest among the people of Winterhold still simmered beneath the surface. The college had survived the battle, but Shalidor knew that the real test was yet to come, the trial of the rebels. Shalidor called for a meeting of the surviving leaders, his resolve firm. He would offer justice, but it would not be a simple execution of his enemies. He had learned from the past that vengeance only bred more bloodshed. There had to be a way to heal the rift in Winterhold, to bring the rebels to justice without further dividing the land. The gathered leaders stood in the Hall of the Elements, the stone walls echoing with the weight of their discussion. Falandil, Relise, Harvold, and a few others from the college had come together to find a path forward, but the air was thick with tension. Everyone knew what was at stake. "Shalidor," Relise began, his voice quiet but steady. "What will we do with the rebels? There are many among them who are not beyond redemption. We cannot simply execute them." Shalidor nodded. "I agree. Ulfrid's followers are misguided, not necessarily evil, but their actions have consequences. They attacked the college, and they threatened the safety of Winterhold. We must show them that there are consequences to their rebellion, but we cannot allow this to spiral into further violence." Falandil stepped forward, his face grave. "We must also consider the unity of the college and the city. If we simply exile Ulfrid and his followers, it will appear weak. If we execute them all, it will show the people that we are no better than the rebels themselves." Harvold grunted, his large hands resting on the table before him. "Then what do you propose, mage? We're not dealing with a few bandits here. These are people who tried to bring the entire city to its knees." Shalidor exhaled slowly, his mind working through the possibilities. He knew that there was no simple solution, no one right answer. But he had spent years building the college on a foundation of knowledge, understanding, and unity. This trial could either break that foundation or reinforce it. The way he handled this moment would shape the future of Winterhold and the future of the college itself. "I propose a trial," Shalidor said, his voice steady. "We will not execute the rebels, but neither will we let them go unpunished. A tribunal of mages, along with representatives of the villagers, will decide their fate. We will seek to understand their motives, their grievances, and determine a fair punishment. We must show the people of Winterhold that justice can be achieved without bloodshed." The room fell silent as the weight of Shalidor's words settled over them. Falandil and Relise exchanged a glance, and after a moment of contemplation both nodded in agreement. "If you believe this is the right course of action, then we stand with you," Falandil said. Shalidor looked out over the group, his heart heavy with the responsibility of the decision. "It is the only course of action. We must rebuild Winterhold, but we must also heal it." In the days that followed, the college prepared for the trial. Word of the tribunal spread through Winterhold, and the people gathered in anticipation. The rebels, now captured and held in the college's dungeons, would face their fate before both the mages and the villagers they had once called allies. Shalidor stood at the front of the Hall of the Elements, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had called for unity, but it would be tested today. He had to prove that the college could be more than just a place of magic. It could be a beacon of justice, a symbol of hope for a divided city. The trial began with the arrival of the accused, led into the hall by a pair of college guards. Ulfrid Frostbane, shackled and defiant, walked with a swagger that had once made him a revered leader among his people. But now, as he stood before the tribunal, there was no arrogance in his gaze, only a flicker of desperation. "Shalidor," Ulfrid spat, his voice hoarse, "you are no better than the ones who came before you. You're a mage, a foreigner in a land that never wanted you, and now you want to make us bow to your false promises." Shalidor met Ulfrid's gaze, his own expression unreadable. "You may not like my methods, Ulfrid, but your rebellion has only brought ruin to Winterhold. You must face the consequences of your actions. But I ask you, what would you have had us do? Let Winterhold fade into obscurity? Let magic and knowledge be forgotten?" Ulfrid sneered. Magic is a plague. It's the reason Winterhold fell. You think you can rebuild, but it's already too late. You can never undo what you've done. Shalidor's voice was firm, unwavering. Then let this trial be a lesson for you and for all who would seek to tear down the future for the sake of the past. The tribunal proceeded, each rebel given a chance to explain their actions and their motivations. Shalidor listened intently, searching for the truth beneath the anger and resentment. He had learned long ago that the path to peace was not through force, but through understanding. He would give these rebels a chance, just as he had given Winterhold itself a chance to heal. The verdict, when it came, was a mixture of punishment and reconciliation. Ulfrid and his followers would be exiled from Winterhold, their magic stripped from them, but they would not be executed. They would live out the rest of their days in quiet exile, far from the lands they had once known. It was not the end of their journey, but the beginning of their redemption. Winterhold had weathered the storm. The college stood strong, its foundation of knowledge and unity unshaken. But it was not just the college that had endured. Winterhold itself had been tested, and though it had faltered at times, it had emerged stronger. The trials of the past had brought its people closer together, united in a common cause. Shalidor stood once again at the top of the college's tower, looking out over the city. The winds had calmed, and the sky above was clear. Winterhold's future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it felt as though the city had a chance to heal. And for Shalidor, that was enough. Epilogue. A new dawn for Winterhold. Winterhold stood beneath the weight of a new era, the snow-heavy skies casting long shadows over the city. The college, though scarred by the rebellion, had been rebuilt stronger, its presence now a symbol not only of magic but of the endurance of Winterhold's people. The scars of the past had not been erased, but the future, for the first time in years, seemed filled with promise. Shalidor stood once more on the balcony of the Hall of the Elements, gazing out over the city below. Winterhold's streets had grown quieter in the months since the trial. The rebellion was a memory now, a painful chapter that had nearly torn the city asunder. But the trial had done what many thought impossible. It had united the people. Ulfrid and his followers were gone, exiled far from the land they had once sought to control. Yet, in their absence, something remarkable had occurred. A spirit of cooperation, of shared purpose, had taken root. Shalidor was no longer just a mage of power. He had become a leader of people, a figure who had weathered the storm and whose vision had steered Winterhold through its darkest hours. But the truth of it was, he had not done it alone. The college was not just a school of magic, it had become a beacon for those who wished to rebuild, to create something new. The mages who had stood with him, Falandil, Relise, Harvold and the others, had been the backbone of this new Winterhold. They had shared in his dream and fought beside him to see it realized. And now, as the first rays of sunlight pierced the darkened sky, Winterhold was at the brink of a new dawn. It was a place not defined by its past, but by the possibilities of its future. Magic and knowledge would continue to grow here, but so too would the bond between the people and the land. The war had ended, but the work of rebuilding was far from finished. "Shalidor," a voice called from behind him. It was Falandil, his tall figure approaching with quiet purpose. Shalidor turned, his expression softening as the Altmer drew closer. "Falandil, it's good to see you." Falandil gave a slight bow of respect, his expression thoughtful. The Altmer have agreed to continue their support as promised. We will not abandon Winterhold in its time of need. I believe this will be a place of great learning, a center for magic, the likes of which Skyrim has never seen. Shalidor nodded, a sense of quiet pride swelling within him. "And I will make sure it remains that way. The college will be a place for all those who seek knowledge. It will be a sanctuary for the mages, a place to learn, but also a place to heal. We are not just here to build with magic, we are here to build with purpose." Falandil's gaze lingered on Shalidor for a moment, and then he nodded in agreement. "You have made Winterhold a place of promise, Shalidor. The future is no longer clouded with doubt." As they stood there, watching the city below, the wind began to shift, carrying with it the scent of the sea. Winterhold, once a forgotten ruin clinging to the edge of the world, was now a place of transformation. And that transformation had begun with a single vision, one mage's dream to make something greater than the sum of its parts. In the months that followed, the college continued to grow and prosper. Scholars from all over Tamriel began to visit, drawn by the promise of knowledge and the opportunities the college offered. The first steps toward integration had been taken, and while challenges still arose, the College of Winterhold had become a center for arcane study, a testament to what could be accomplished when different peoples and cultures came together under the banner of learning. Harvald, ever the practical builder, remained by Shalidor's side, helping to design new wings for the college, expanding its infrastructure to accommodate the ever-growing number of students and researchers. He had become a trusted advisor, his sharp mind and sturdy hands a steadying force for the college's expansion. Relies, with his quiet strength, continued to lead the efforts in gathering magical knowledge from across Tamriel. His studies had deepened, and he had become one of the foremost experts in magical artifacts and their properties. Together with Falandil, he worked tirelessly to establish strong relations with other magical institutions, ensuring the college's standing in the wider world. But Shalidor knew that, for all their accomplishments, there was still more to be done. The college could never rest on its laurels. Magic, after all, was a tool, one that could heal or destroy, depending on the wielder's heart. And Shalidor had learned the hard way that it was the responsibility of the mage to guide that power with wisdom. And so, he continued to work tirelessly, teaching, guiding, and seeking new knowledge. His vision had become more than just a dream, it had become a mission. Winterhold, the college, and the people who had once doubted it had all been transformed. They had survived the storm together, and in the aftermath, they had built something greater than they had ever imagined. Shalidor looked out at the distant horizon, the winds of the north sweeping over the land, and he knew that the work of rebuilding Winterhold and the College of Winterhold was far from over. It would take time, patience, and a steady hand to guide the people forward. But one thing was certain: Winterhold would not fade into obscurity. It would thrive. The end.